And welcome back to 120 Months. We're doing a month-by-month retrospective of MTV's 120 Minutes, the whole first decade of one of our favorite video shows, I guess you would call it. If you were alive in the late 80s and early 90s and you wanted to see some of your favorite college radio bands or, indie bands, I don't even think the term alternative at this point, we're in 1987 right now, was really a thing. You had to kind of wait until, was it Saturday night or Sunday night?
It was Sunday night later on. I'm not sure if it started on Sundays.
I think it may have started on Saturdays. Yeah, so you had to wait. You had a 2-hour block. You had your VCR ready, and hopefully you were going to get to see your favorite band, and maybe for the first time ever, see what they look like or whatever. So it's been kind of fun to go back and dig into those playlists, and we're each picking a song of a band or a song that we really dug from that particular month. And then we've got a mystery song that none of us had ever heard before that we're going to dive into at the end of the episode. We are right now on episode 4, so that means April of 1987. And I've got my co-host with me, Keith Porterfield, and kicking it off for us this week, Scott Mobley.
All right, so for this episode, or this month, I chose the song My Biggest Thrill by the Mighty Lemon Drops. This is a British pop band from the mid-'80s. They form in '85, right before this. So they have 3 core members: Paul Marsh, David Newton, Tony Linehan are the rhythm guitarist, lead guitarist, and bassist, respectively. And they kind of rotate through some other guys. They have some other band names. They have some other projects that they settle in '85 on the Mighty Lemon Drops, and they get signed by Sire Records and release the album Happy Head. It comes out in '86, and this was the lead-off single from that album. I have a feeling their second album was probably in the can, ready to go when this video pops up on MTV at this time. It comes out just shortly after this. So their sound is very typical of this era of British pop music. It's kind of upbeat, sort of punk flavored, maybe a little psychedelic. Definitely hints of Echo and the Bunnymen is what you're hearing here. And I think this is, although this I would not in a million years call this song shoegaze, you kind of hear the early hints of it here. Like, I think I was trying to look up like who claims this band as an influence, and you don't find a lot, but I have a feeling that bands like the Jesus and Mary Chain probably think these guys are an influence and stuff like that. So even though this isn't technically shoegaze, I think it sort of fits the bill as an influence on that. So these guys are around from '86 to around '92, and they have some hits, they have several albums, they go on tour, all that stuff. They're being mildly successful, and then there's no story about why it ends. They just get to about 92 and say, screw it. And they go their separate ways. So one of these guys is like a record producer. He's produced a few British bands. Like the other ones, I think, sell insurance or something. I don't know. But there's no real story about, they just weren't getting along, or they put out an album that was, too weird and tanked and got dropped by their label. None of that is out there. These guys just kind of played around for 7 years and then went, all right, well, we're done, we're out, and quit. So I think there is some interesting influence here. I think this is a good band. I think this is a great song. And I'll tell you why I picked it, why I stumbled across it. So when I was younger, this is 1986 when this album comes out, 87 when this is on MTV. This is not my style of music at that time. But I liked, when there were record stores, to go to record stores and shop around. And I would buy things because I liked the name of the band, or I liked the cover of the album that they were selling. I don't remember why I bought this album, but I did, and it's got to be that. I either liked the name of the album, Happy Head, I thought the album cover was cool, something like that. But I had this album, and I always kind of dug this band, but after maybe an album or two, I just stopped following them. So it was kind of neat to go back and look at these guys again and kind of remember, I couldn't remember why I bought the album. I'm assuming I just liked the name of the band. But I remember having this. I remember enjoying it. The video, I don't think I had ever seen. I thought when I put it on, it might trigger something, but I don't think I'd ever seen this video. It's basically just them playing live, kind of typical 80s video. And then somebody come get your girl. I don't know who's dancing, and that girl is dancing around in the studio there, but they've got this girl, kind of bopping around in between cuts of the band playing.
By the way, seems to be the only person having a really good time in that video.
Exactly, yeah. The
other guys.
Whatever. She's digging it. She's feeling the song. So, anyway, that's my biggest throw by Mighty Lemon Drops. This was a fun little cruise down memory lane for me. I remember this band. I remember this song, and I kind of forgotten about them. So this was fun for me.
Yeah, I have stoic underlined for the lead singer's demeanor during this entire song, which was kind of funny because I was vaguely familiar with the band and the style. This song, I couldn't remember if I remember the specific song or not, but like the vibe was kind of what I thought I was going to get from the Mighty Lemon Drops. But then when I saw them, if you saw the video and you took the girl out, and you didn't hear the music, you would assume it was like a funeral dirge, maybe, or like like the saddest song you've ever heard.
I think that was pretty common at this time for them to be
so.
Sort of stoic. Maybe that's a holdover from Joy Division or something. Like these British bands were all kind of like that. Like if you watch Echo and the Bunnymen videos, they're like that too. They looked much angrier than the music would suggest they were.
Yeah, the song is quite upbeat, and it's
But I think that's pretty common. The Echo and the Bunnymen, Roxy Music comes to mind. They had that sort of vibe of being dark and brooding, even though they were kind of rocking out.
I was going to say stoic's definitely one way to put it. My note that I put was, this dude looks like he's about to fall asleep while he's singing the song. I'm not actually sure he's going to stay awake through the entire video before he's going to, just going to fall over and stop singing the song before the video's done.
It's like they're rocking out, but they don't want you to know they're enjoying rocking out.
Yeah.
It'd be great if they cut back to him at one point and he's just like asleep and like he's like sleeping on the drum set. The other connection I made, and granted, like if you've listened to the last 2 episodes, and spoiler alert, this episode as well, I've been kind of in the Athens, Georgia scene for my last couple picks. This song could be a Love Tractor song. Like it's got a little of that Athens, we talked about it last episode, dance rock, which is not really a thing anymore. It stopped being a thing, I would say, even in the early 90s, where bands played music you could sing along to but also dance along to. Like that very quickly kind of not became a thing that just wasn't really that popular. Certainly not an alternative in indie music. I guess pop music maybe has always kind of had some of that. These days not so much. So I could see them like showing up in Athens and playing, and everybody just totally getting where they were coming from, because there is that connection. I mean, obviously it has a British twist to it, but I heard a lot of Brian Jonestown Massacre in this, like, which is, they were obviously more on the psychedelic tip, and some of their music obviously goes in a different direction, but this particular song, and I was really I listened to it twice to try to specifically put my finger on it, what it was that was triggering that. And I think it's as simple as like some of the melodies and chord progressions just felt very much like the Brian Jonestown Massacre, which I thought was kind of an interesting connection. That they wouldn't record until 8, 9, 10 years after this. So whether or not they were influenced, I'm not sure. But those were the two things that kind of connected in my head when I was listening to this. And also just great song. Yeah, great, happy, upbeat, very enjoyable, and it was fun to go back and reacquaint myself with these guys.
I don't know if the Brian Jonestown Massacre would call these guys an influence, but I think they would definitely call the Jesus and Mary Chain an influence, and the connection is there. I think that's the link, is that kind of early shoegaze where it was still poppy and rocking, before it got too drony.
I think a part of that, you mentioned that you thought it kind of also sounded a little bit like a precursor to shoegaze, and then, the psychedelic kind of effect, that, made, you might think about Brian Jonestown. I think a lot of that has to do with the guitar. He's the lead guitarist is playing that 12-string guitar, and it's kind of got a lot of reverb and distortion and all that on it. I think it's that guitar sound that, to me anyway, kind of, when you mention shoegaze, Scott, and when you mention kind of psychedelia, Mike, like both of those things seem true to me, but I think a lot of it has to do with that guitar sound, that kind of ringing, echoey guitar sound that he gets out of that 12-string. And I'm not sure. I'd have to look up to see exactly what it is that he's playing there. But I do remember, I'm almost positive it was a 12-string guitar.
Yeah, that's dedefinitely it, probably. There's probably something to that sound is linked to that guitar.
Yeah. I had never heard these guys either, and I have on multiple non-consecutive occasions had people recommend this band to me, and you just never followed up on it. Always said, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's something I should do. I'll check those guys out at some point." After listening to the song, I know now why people were recommending it to me, because this is right up my alley. I really.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I knew you were gonna like this one. I don't know
Yeah,
I don't
great
know how,
song.
but I knew when I listened to it again, I was like, "Oh, Keith's gonna dig this one." I think maybe the reason that you never like connected to it, other than people recommending it, is like I said, they're just not in the zeitgeist. Like
Yeah.
they kind of came in and did their thing and disappeared. Like there's no and then nobody mentions them anymore. If it wasn't for this, I had forgotten about them, and I had this album. I was a fan of these guys, So
Yeah.
I think maybe that's it. You just don't hear about them enough, and that could there's multiple reasons for that, not the least of which is there's just not that much output, and they do kind of sound like some other bands, and I think they kind of just got washed into the whole sound of British pop at the time, and they're just not maybe that memorable, but they are a good band, and if you like this song, I think you'll like just about everything they do, honestly.
I also thought the bass part in it, we talked a little bit about the guitar. I thought the bass part was a little similar to kind of the stuff that was going on with like The Farm and Soup Dragons and those kind of bands. So it kind of feels to me like you've got some disparate elements of like different types of music. Not that they were drawing off these other things, but all kind of coming together to make its own little thing. It's got little elements of different things in it, but overall, yeah, just a great little guitar pop song.
Yeah, and I think that's the other link. If you can link it to shoegaze one way, you can also link it to that other British pop that came out in the late '80s and early '90s, like Soup Dragons and Jesus Jones and those bands. There's some connection there too. Where pop music, where that branch broke off in pop music in Britain. It's that's there too. And yeah, you're right. That bass line is funky.
It was funny because when you said they made it to 1992 and then they just kind of disappeared, my first reaction was, geez, that's like right when they probably had their biggest opportunity, right? Like that should have been where they blew up. But and I still think that's true. But I was remembering from when we did an episode of 35,000 Watts, and I was doing some deeper research on Blur, and I remember when they were talking about recording their first album, them getting pressure from labels and everything to sound like the Soup Dragons and Mighty Lemon Drops and that late 80s British music wave, as opposed to what kind of ended up becoming Britpop in the 90s. Like and Blur, I think, is largely credited for helping kind of make that transition, and that was a very deliberate choice on the part of Blur to distance themselves from that style of British pop and start to kind of usher in this newer type that ended up becoming what you heard in the 90s. So maybe that's it. The Mighty Lemon Drops were kind of a casualty of that switch in Britain. Yeah,
that's certainly possible. But yeah, you're right. They disbanded in '92 when this kind of music started getting really popular. So who knows why?
Certainly, from our perspective,
it's hard to find the whys of that online. So I dug pretty deep on these guys, and I couldn't find, they hated each other or, their producer stole all their money. That's just not out there. It's not there. They just woke up one day and went, all right, we're good, and they quit. So,
and I wonder if that's our perspective as being like in college radio in the USA. And thinking, man, like we were hungry for British music, and we were more than happy. I know we played the Mighty Lemon Drops on KTXT. We would have been more than happy to play their new album and whatever. But I'm wondering if in Britain something else was happening that maybe we weren't as hip to, where that type of music was kind of falling away, and so they weren't seen the same way they were seen over here in the USA. Sure. Maybe they were sensing this like, oh, we're on the way out. We're dinosaurs, whereas we really didn't perceive that. From our perspective. Maybe,
I think that's fair. We don't know, and we can't know. But
we can't. It's a shame though, because I think I think they would have done quite well, at least in the USA in the early '90s. But who knows? I don't know. Maybe not. All right. Well, moving on to a band that did do quite well in the late '80s and early '90s on KTXT and in the USA, we've got the choice of Mr. Keith Porterfield up next.
Yeah. So this week I picked a song called "Take the Skinheads Bowling" by Camper Van Beethoven.
Last night there were skinheads on my lawn. Take the skinheads bowling, take them bowling. Take the skinheads bowling, take them bowling.
Last episode, we talked a little bit about Husker Du and Bob Mould, and I'd mentioned I checked in on Sugar, but I never checked in on anything else Bob Mould had done, I should say. I'm in the same boat with Dave Lowry, actually. I had bought a couple of Cracker albums in the early 90s, early to mid 90s. Really enjoyed them, but just had never really followed through, didn't stick with them going forward, never went back to check in on Camper Van Beethoven or anything. I picked that one specifically because I saw the name of the band on there and I was like, this is a band that I have for a lot of years probably should have gone back and looked at and never did. So this gave me the opportunity to do that. Dave Lowry, as it turns out, is a really interesting dude. I was looking on his wiki bio, and it says, like, guitarist, producer, songwriter, mathematician. I was like, mathematician? So go look, and sure enough, he has got a degree in mathematics from Cal State or Cal Santa Cruz. He's also got a doctor of education from the University of Georgia, and he's a lecturer at the University of Georgia, none of which did I have any idea any of that stuff was going on. He's been really active in like artists' rights, as far as like he was part of a lawsuit against Spotify to get them to set up a fund to compensate songwriters and publishers. And so even above and beyond all his music stuff, this is a guy that's just led an interesting life. His first band back in the 80s was Camper Van Beethoven. And listening to Cracker, they're a little more of a kind of a straightforward, just guitar rock band. Camper Van Beethoven, from what I read and the stuff I listened to, is a little more eclectic. This song, Take the Skinheads Bowling, is very much just kind of a jangle pop song, and it's a really good jangle pop song. It came off their very first album called Telephone Free Landslide Victory. It came out in 1985. They were not expecting this song to do much. They weren't expecting it to be a hit or anything of that nature, because they wrote it as kind of just a goofy one-off. Like, if you listen to the lyrics and are trying to parse their meaning, there isn't any. Dave Lowry himself has said that this song, they specifically tried to write lyrics that didn't really mean anything. Like, one verse has nothing to do with the next verse and all that kind of stuff. And there's no secret meaning behind Taking the Skinheads Bowling or anything like that. I think that was just a funny phrase that they came up with and thought would be, the funny name for a song, funny chorus for a song. So yeah, they were not.
And they were correct.
Yeah, they were correct. Yep, exactly. But yeah, they were not expecting this thing to be a hit or anything, because they were not taking this song at all seriously. It has been covered a few times. Other bands have done this. Teenage Fan Club covered it, and that version of it, the Teenage Fan Club version of this song, made it onto the Michael Moore film Bowling for Columbine. Manic Street Preachers have covered this song. So it's been covered by various people. It's got its following and everything. It's a pretty groovy little song. Like I said, kind of jangly guitar pop. Not a whole lot going on here. There are a couple of interesting things I thought about it. If you're listening through to it, on the second verse, some background vocals come in that I think is a neat little touch that are only on that one verse. And then when it gets to the third verse, the background vocals don't come back in, but there's a second little guitar part playing kind of a counter melody underneath that's not on any of the rest of the song, that only comes in on that part of the song. So straightforward song for the most part, but there are a couple of little interesting things going on in there that I thought were pretty neat. And yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I went and listened to some other Camper Van Beethoven songs just to see, if this was representative of what they did, and it seems like it pretty much is. Some of the other stuff was a little harder, but anyway, this one seemed pretty representative of what they do. So I enjoyed it. This may be a band that I go back and try to listen to more stuff of. But yeah, Dave Lowry's still producing albums. Cracker went on for a lot longer than I thought it did. Camper Van Beethoven got back together in the early aughts and actually, of all things, recorded a cover of the Fleetwood Mac album Tusk in its entirety and released that, among other things. So he's been active with both of those bands. He's also put out a lot of solo records. So yeah, interesting dude, long career, and it began with this song, this weird little jangle pop song that means nothing apparently, but is also a lot of fun actually, and a fun little video. Lots of imagery of bowling alleys and guys with shaved heads and crew cuts throwing bowling balls around and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a fun one. But that's Take the Skinheads Bowling by Camper Van Beethoven.
I had never seen this video. I knew the song, and I remember the song because we played it a lot at KTXT, but I had never seen this video, and I loved it. I just said, where did they find that footage? It almost makes me think it was faked, like it was shot and then made to look like it was old scratchy film. I don't know.
I think maybe,
because
yeah.
There can't be a lot of B-roll of skinheads bowling laying around in studios, but maybe there is. Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, I loved the video. I had never seen it before. But yeah, this band, this is one of those bands that, and I could name 50 of them probably, that was around and was being played when I was on the air on KTXT, and I just never dug into. I knew the songs we played, and I never thought much more about it than that. And I don't know why. I can't really tell you why. Because I like everything I've heard from them. I love this song. In reading about these guys a little bit, one of the things I love about them, and this is, if you read a little bit about David Lowry, he's kind of this guy. Like, he likes to ruffle feathers and kind of push boundaries a little bit, And so when this band formed, I think it's fair to call them a punk band, even though it's maybe more of the post-punk jangle pop sort of thing, maybe a little closer to like Minutemen than it is to hardcore. But they would go to hardcore shows and get on the bill. Like they would show up in Southern California where like Black Flag and the Germs were playing and be like, yeah, we're a punk band too. Can we play? And they'd be like, yeah, sure. And then they'd get up and play Take the Skinheads Bowling to like an aggressive hardcore punk crowd and probably really, really piss them off. I love that. I think that's really cool. You mentioned that, David Lowery after this goes on to form Cracker. Cracker is a fantastic band. If you haven't heard anything from them, fix that problem. They are really, really good. But yeah, then, go back and listen to some of this. It's like I said, it's all kind of sounds like this. It's very kind of a thing, but they're good at it, and their songs are catchy and fun and kind of funny sometimes when they make sense. And yeah, I got a kick out of revisiting this one like I did the other song as well. And yeah, I'd never seen this video. I wanted to shout out real quick too. If you do a search for this video on YouTube, somebody has done a mashup of this song with Here Comes Your Man by the Pixies, and it's really great. Like, I would have never put that together in my head, but it really works. So that's just something fun to check out if you're out there looking at this.
I really like this song. This is one I definitely remember playing at KTXT. It's not, it's not exactly a novelty song, but it's obviously very memorable because of the name of it and the chorus. And I was trying to express this earlier, and I think I ended up muffing it so bad that it's going to be edited out of the episode. So I'm going to try again now. So we were 4 episodes in. We're in 1987. I guess what I was trying to express is that to me, this is the song that most feels like what's going to be coming up in the 90s or the late 80s and the early 90s as alternative and indie rock take off and college radio really blows up. It feels like the most 90s song we've done yet, if that makes sense. I mean, it's still very much an 80s song and of its time, but the sensibility of it, the talk verse, the joke or the whatever of Take the Skinheads Bowling, just the irreverent lyrics or whatever, to me is kind of the ones we've talked about, starting to really kind of be a window into what's going to happen with 90s alternative rock. And the Weezers of the world, for example, that just kind of irreverent hard rock, kind of punk, kind of whatever vibe. And so that was kind of the first thing that hit me when I heard this again for the first time in a long time.
I was shocked that this came out in 1987. Like, I didn't know that. In my mind, and my mind is a terrible place, but in my mind, these guys were contemporaries of Pavement and Sebado and like the early 90s country rockish punk bands, like that's where I had them in sort of the chronology of all of this. To know that they were, they actually formed in '83, so they were around for a while when this came out. I had no idea. I did not know that. So to me, this was a KTXT band at the time that I was at KTXT. But we were actually playing their oldies.
Yeah,
which I didn't.
I'm
know.
kind of the same. Yeah, if you listen to this and didn't know, I think you would probably guess early '90s track, that's an early 90s track. And I think in my head canon, that was kind of also where I was putting it. And it's such a precursor to what would happen across the wide breadth of the type of music that we played. But there's definitely a certain type of band that blew up on college radio and alternative radio in the 90s. And I think a lot of them would look back to Camper Van Beethoven as being an influence, and Cracker too, but Cracker was a little more contemporary with them. I will also say about David Lowery being an awesome dude. He absolutely is an awesome dude. He was going to be in 35,000 Watts, the movie, which we haven't talked about yet. By the way, there's a movie documentary called 35,000 Watts, Story of College Radio. It's out right now on Amazon Prime and on Tubi, and we talk about all things college radio. David was lined up to be in the film, and his wife as well. His wife is Velina Vigo, who was in a band called Mystery Date, also kind of part of the Athens, the southern, that southern scene that was happening. But she has been for a very long time been the talent buyer at 40 Watt Club. So all the amazing music and bands and stuff that has happened at the 40 Watt Club, a lot of that is due to his wife, Felina. So they're kind of a power couple in the rock world, I mean, for sure. Not to mention the fact that he's a freaking PhD mathematician, and that was actually why I wasn't able to interview him. I showed up at their house, and he was like, I got to go do a lecture. I don't know if like we had a scheduling conflict or a mistake or something came up, but he was actually on his way out. So I got to meet him, but I didn't get to interview him for the film, but his wife is in the film. Anyway, yeah. So that kind of was an interesting thing that I learned in researching the film, was that not only beyond being a great songwriter and a great musician and very active in helping musicians get what they deserve, financially speaking, he's also a brilliant mathematician and teaches that at University of Georgia, which just totally blew me away.
Yeah, definitely an interesting dude. And before we leave real quick, you mentioned that you kind of drew a line between Camper Van Beethoven and Weezer. Scotty, you mentioned a couple of other bands as well. I see the line. You mentioned some of the country rock bands. I see the line going to bands like the Lemonheads and Matthew Sweet and like Material Issue and bands like that. A little more on the kind of the jangle pop side as well. So I think if you look at the, all three of us had kind of different ideas of where the tree branched off from Camper Van Beethoven, where it went. So I mean, I think these guys are a pretty influential band. A pretty eclectic mix of elements. That probably did lead to a lot of different kinds of music, of different things that kind of followed up that had that kind of as an influence.
I think you could say that, they are an eclectic band. You can say the same thing about Cracker, too. Like, it's hard to pinpoint what Cracker really is. Just like it's hard to pinpoint what this really is. But to be fair, when I say I compare them to those other bands I mentioned, I'm wrong. I mean, they don't sound anything like Pavement or Sebadoh. But in my mind, that's where they were. That was their genre at that time when I was at KTXT. And they probably have some songs that do sound like that. But I just, in my mind, that this was an early 90s band that, we put on the air on KTXT when they came out. They were 10 years old when we put them, or when I was playing them on the air,
And so good. Like, I really like the song. I really like, when I was preparing for the film, I went back and listened to a lot of Camper Van Beethoven and Cracker that I had missed because I kind of just knew the hits, I guess, quote unquote. And yeah, really solid if you ever want to go back and dig into their catalog.
Yeah, the two albums I have are great.
Yeah, very consistent, like all the way through, if I remember right. So we spoke a little bit about Athens, and I did mention that my last two picks were kind of related to Athens and the Southern rock scene that was happening, and today is going to be not going to be an exception to that, because we had another band pop up on 120 Minutes that was part of that scene, that I also interviewed for the film, by the way. So I chose the Squalls, and the song is Na 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 Na. The Squalls are an interesting band. They were first formed in '78, or Bob Hay is the lead singer and kind of, I don't want to say the leader of the band, but he's kind of the front man, and he actually lived in Maine and met a guy who played guitar named Ken, who was up in Maine and was about to head back to Athens, and was telling him about, man, you got to come down and see the scene that's happening, and it's really amazing. And they both learned that they were fans of the Grateful Dead. And so they actually followed the Dead down the Eastern Seaboard and saw like several Dead shows on their way to Athens, and then kind of set up shop down there and became part of that scene that we talked about this, in the last episode, that something was in the water down in Athens. And we kind of talked about how that you had the 40 Watt Club. You had WUOG, a very solid college radio station. You had Wextree Records. You had an art scene and a college scene that was just kind of an incubator where all the right pieces were in place for these bands. And then you had the B-52s who broke out and got to New York and kind of broke the scene open a little bit, because they were so successful and were so different from what people were hearing in New York that people kind of followed the trail back to Athens, and then discovered all the rest of the stuff that was happening. So the Squalls were part of that, and they don't have as much of a catalog as like Love Tractor that we talked about last week. They certainly don't have the success of like REM or even Pylon or whatever. But if you talk to people that were around that time, that were in Athens around that time, I should say, and part of that scene, they always mention the Squalls, like right there with REM and Pylon and Love Tractor and Side Effects, because they were an integral part of that scene. And every one of those bands brought like a slightly different quirk. They each had a take on kind of a similar vibe, but yet you wouldn't really confuse each band for one of the other bands. The Squalls, I think, maybe embraced the country rock aspect of what was going on in Athens a little more than some of the other bands. They were a little I was going to say weirder, but I think Pylon, is also kind of weird. Like B-52s are certainly weird in their own way. So weirder maybe isn't quite it. Eclectic, again, you could apply that, but they eclectic in their own way, I guess, and you really have to kind of listen to the music. They have another song called Crickets, which I think if you listen to that, you'll definitely kind of get a vibe for like, oh yeah, that's quirky. That's a funny thing. That song actually was one of the big ones on college radio, both in Athens on WUOG, and then one of the ones that kind of broke out and got some nationwide airplay and helped them have kind of a big time in like 82, 83, 84 was kind of when they were at their peak, and still involved in the Athens scene in 86 and 87. So the video that you're seeing is from Athens Inside Out, which is kind of a famous documentary about Athens at that time. I think this is the first live video that we've done on the show, like first like actually recorded live.
First purely live one, yeah.
Yeah, like a pure live, and that's because it comes from this documentary. And I think in this same episode of 120 Minutes, and also last month, REM has a song that also came from that documentary that is in the playlist. And I was thinking about choosing that, but I've been wanting to highlight these other bands first. So the Squalls was part of that documentary, and again, just really an integral part of the Athens scene that they didn't quite break out as big as Love Tractor and Pylon, and certainly not as big as REM, but a really fun band, and one that I think if you are a fan of REM and a fan of the Athens music scene, but maybe somehow the Squalls slipped by you, go check it out. They have like one studio album and then a live album that was recorded at the 40 Watt. So it's not a deep dive that you have to do to really get caught up on the Squalls. There's not a lot out there. I think probably like 22 songs total, maybe, in terms of what you can find like on YouTube and Apple Music, but worth the time. Yeah, Bob's a great dude. He's in the film at 35,000 watts if you want to hear him talk a little bit more about his experience. Yeah, I think they deserve a listen and maybe a little more credit for some of the influence they had on some of the other bands that were happening around that time.
Yeah, I'd never heard these guys before at all. Never heard of them, never heard any of their music, never heard anything at all about them until, you picked them, and so I kind of looked into them for this. I liked the song. It is, I don't know how their entire catalog is. This song is as harmless a piece of bubblegum guitar pop as you're ever going to find, but it's a really good piece of bubblegum guitar pop. I mean, they're good at it. I liked the video. I liked the live video. My favorite thing about it, of course, is the bass player who's smoking a pipe throughout the entire song. And like, at first I thought, he's just chomping on this thing. He's not actually smoking. No, he's smoking a pipe while he's playing the bass throughout this entire song, puffing away on it. So that was good. And then the singer, what was his name? Bob Hay. Yeah. He looks like he might very well also be the president of the math club at the local university there in Athens. So yeah, I found the video to be funny for those reasons. But I like the song. It's just, there wasn't a whole lot of background to get into on these guys. But yeah, good stuff for sure.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, Keith, you nailed it on the head. Like, this is like harmless jangle pop, but it's really good at it, and I enjoyed this. I heard of this band, but I didn't know anything about them. I had not heard this song, I don't think. But yeah, I mentioned earlier to Mike, it sounds like that Athens thing, like the sort of pop, jangly, country flavored sort of thing. This one felt just a little more country to me than some of the other stuff I've heard. Not in a, it certainly doesn't sound like what they call country music now, but it had a little bit more of a genuine country flavor than a lot of the early REM stuff or some of the other stuff we listened to. But yeah, I really got a kick out of this one. I liked it. But yeah, like you said, there's not a whole lot. There's not a deep tunnel to dig down here. But this was good, and I wanted to take the time to listen to some more stuff. I didn't get a chance to do that yet, but I will. I enjoyed this one.
Definitely check out Crickets. That's a fun one and a little more quirky than this. But yeah, they're pretty straight down the pipe with what they do, and in a good way, absolutely. And Bob definitely. He doesn't look like a rock star. You could picture him and Mike Mills going and just like playing Dungeons and Dragons after the show. Like he has that kind of vibe to him. But it's super nice. He was so nice when we met and interviewed him, and he had like it was like a box of like recipe. It was index cards, but it was kind of like a recipe box like your mom used to have that had all the recipes in it. But it was, a stack of index cards, and it's in the film where he holds up this stack, and that stack is all college radio stations information. And he was talking about how it was fully organized, and they recorded the album, and then they basically went through and sent the album out to every single college radio station, and it's not like the label was doing it for them, or they had promotion, but they were doing it themselves, because that was when, unless you had like a really great contract, you were DIYing it and stuffing envelopes. And so it's really fun to hear him talk about it. He's just the nicest guy. And yeah, like you guys said, there's not a lot of information about them on Wikipedia or out there. Their website kind of has their history that tells the story that I just told you of him meeting Ken and coming down. But I mean, they played 64 shows at the 40 Watt. So you know that everybody in Athens went and saw the Squalls at some point, right? They were that kind of band where like locally they just kept playing and playing. And when a band does that many, and that's just one club, so they played other clubs in Athens, and of course they toured. So like when you play live that much, you get really good, and you can tell seeing this video, because it is very much a live video, not a fake live video. They're great, just like we talked about Love Tractor. Great musicians. They're super in the pocket. Like everything I've heard from them, because they have a live album on Apple Music that's out called Live from the 40 Watt. It sounds just like the studio album. I mean, they nail it. They're very, very good live, and it's the only difference I really picked up from listening to the studio version of this, the live version, was I think Bob's country vibe comes out even more. Like in his vocal, it's a little more even apparent in the studio version than it is in the live version, which is kind of goes back to what you were saying, Scott, of them embracing that part of.
But that's just a sign of a really tight band, that they could get in the studio and do one thing and then do it exactly that way when they get on stage.
Mean, just nail it.
They are tight, and that's what that is. Is that whoever produced them probably got in the studio and said, "All right, you guys just do that, like do what you did at the 40 Watt the other night," and they recorded.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's what they do, and they're good. They're a tight band. That's a real talent to be able to do that.
You guys are both bigger film buffs than I am. Have either of y'all actually seen Athens Inside Out? I'm interested now after just doing a little reading about it.
I did, but it was a while ago. I don't remember much about it, but I know I have seen it. So I'd be happy to sit and watch it again and report back, but it's been so long that I couldn't really tell you much about it. I remember that I saw it. I remember that I enjoyed it, and that's about it. I can tell you off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's definitely worth seeing, and it's got a ton of live performance in it. So it's not just a doc of like talking heads talking about Athens or whatever. And it's very contemporary. It was made at a time when these bands were still on the not even like at the prime, but some of them were still on the upward swing. So like you're seeing them definitely contemporary with when that scene was alive and vibrant. Not that it died. The Athens scene it's remained vibrant, but yeah, for a documentarian to capture that moment instead of like kind of going back 20 years later and trying to get stories and stuff, that's what I liked about it, as well, is that you're getting to see that contemporary view of what was happening in Athens. And then if you like those bands, then you get to see some really cool live performances. The sound quality and the film quality are both hit or miss, but yeah, definitely worth tracking down.
I just looked it up. It was released in 1986, which means it was filmed probably between 83 and 85. So this is early on in that. The only band at that time that was really big was probably the B-52s, and REM is getting there at that point. So that's really a good time capsule of sort of what that was at the time.
All right, so we've each chosen our three songs from April of 1987, but now we've got what may end up becoming our favorite part of these episodes. I don't know. So far, so far it's been a blast, and I don't think this episode is going to be any different because this was a hell of a choice. We choose one song that none of us had ever heard before, and we listen to it usually just like a week or so before we record. This one I think was so funny that Scott was like, okay, you guys got to listen to this like last week. He was like, I know we're not record for a week, but you guys got to hear this because it's everything you would hope for in a mystery song that just comes out of nowhere. So tell us what we're talking about, Scott.
Okay, so the song that we chose this week is by a band called Swinging Pistons, and the title varies depending on where you look it up, but it's something along the lines of, ever since I was young, I love the sound of machines. You can find it under the title, I Love the Sound of Machines. You can find it under Since I Was Young. Anyway, it's one of those. So Since I Was Young, I Love the Sound of Machines by Swingin' Pistons. We picked this one because we like the name of the band, and I put it on, and every once in a while, guys, you just stumble across something that brings you an immense amount of joy. And this song was that for me. I almost feel like I should stop because you guys may not have loved this as much as I did. And I'm maybe being a little hyperbolous. I don't know, but man, did I love this song. So the video is a bunch of old footage of people from the 20s and 30s, flappers basically dancing, and a couple of things of guys hitting hammers with machines a la Metropolis, like that sort of thing, all edited together to this song that is basically a sort of early form of industrial, is the best I can describe it. This guy basically, decided to make a song about how he loves music made by machines, and then he made a song with a bunch of machines, and
And by God, he did.
And by God, he did. It's catchy and fun, and the video's great, and I loved everything about it. So I started going down the rabbit hole, and that's where things start to get weird. But the song was made by a guy named William Tucker. He is a guitarist from New Jersey. Before this, he was a guitar teacher, and he was in several other bands. I looked into a little bit of it. The only one that was of any note was a band called Regressive Aid, which was an instrumental band, all this instrumental music. But unlike other instrumental bands of this era, like Man or Astro Man or Shadowy Men from a Shadowy Planet, who leaned more into like surf guitar kind of stuff, it's not that. It's almost like early pop punk, just with no lyrics. It's pretty good. It's a bunch of little 2-minute songs that you keep waiting for some guy to start screaming over, and it just doesn't happen. But it's pretty good. Anyway, they don't really go anywhere. So he is, like I said, a guitar teacher. He famously taught one of the guys in Ween how to play the guitar. He was his guitar teacher. I don't know if that speaks highly of his skills as a guitar teacher, but
I was going to jump in. I was like, no, okay, never mind.
yeah,
Never mind.
but he did teach somebody famous how to play the guitar, for whatever that's worth. So he makes this song kind of on a whim. He gets on his machines and puts together this just delightfully catchy song, and releases it as a single with the intention of Swinging Pistons and this project becoming something more. However, that never happens because Al Jorgensen of Ministry hears this song and says, I dig this, and you need to join Ministry as our touring guitarist. And he does that. And so for the rest of his career, he is the guitarist for Ministry on the Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste tour. He plays with Chris Conley. He plays with My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult. He plays with all the Chicago industrial bands, basically. And that becomes his career. He unfortunately committed suicide in 1999, and there's not much information about that. But what is interesting about this to me is that this song is only available as a single. So Swinging Pistons never became anything. He never went back to the project. And the other thing that really threw me off was, if you watch the video on YouTube, there's one that obviously was taped off of MTV2. And, on the videos, they put name of the band, name of the song, and the name of the album that it is on. That video has as the name of the album, Rock Art and the X-Ray Style, which is the debut album by a band called the Mescaderos, which was Joe Strummer's first side project after the Clash broke up. This song is not on that album. So why MTV chose to put it, as the album title for this song, no idea. There's a whole lot of big giant question marks sort of surrounding this. But forget all of that. Get on YouTube and watch this song and video. It is a delight. And I hope you guys liked it half as much as I did.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody has ever liked it as much as you did, but maybe Al Jorgensen, apparently.
Yeah.
But wow, yeah, I mean, I didn't know what to expect when we choose these. You try to guess kind of from the sound of it, like what's it going to be? And you're like, well, Swinging Pistons, I like the sound of machines. I think it maybe is going to be industrial. And it is. But it's
in a
like,
really poppy sort of, it's hard to describe, honestly.
I had no idea where it was going. Like, it starts and you're kind of like, okay, maybe, if you added a really crunchy guitar, this could go almost into like a Nine Inch Nails kind of direction. It's, but then it very quickly veers into something a little different, and you see him on screen. And then the flapper 1920s chorus comes in. That's just like, where is this coming from? Because I never saw that coming. And then like halfway through in the middle, he rips off Yaz Don't Go, the riff from Yaz Don't Go, like just right in the middle of that. I don't know where that comes from.
I doubt he gave them any songwriting credit for that, but the riff
I was wondering
there,
Yeah, these days you could not get away with that.
You couldn't get away with it now. If they heard it, they would have sued him, but I doubt they did. So
it is really good. It's a song that, like, if it came out 10 years later, it would be less interesting to me, but it's super interesting because of the time it came out and because I didn't know the Ministry connection. So like, it kind of is a precursor to what would become industrial music. I mean, I guess some other people were doing some stuff like it and maybe harder stuff, but it's the elements are all there, and then it's got this whole other thing that's going on that I still can't quite wrap my head around. But
the interesting thing to me is that where Al Jorgensen heard this and said, I can see Al Jorgensen hearing this and going, well, I also like music made by machines, so let's get together and do something. However, that's not what he does with this guy. He takes this guy who made this song and makes him the guitarist for Ministry's tour, where, you know, if you've ever seen Ministry live, you know that the industrial parts of their sound kind of disappear when they play live. They basically become a speed metal band. And that's what this guy was hired to do on the strength of this song, which is really odd to me.
Which I don't even think has a guitar in it at all.
But there it
does.
is.
There's some guitar in there, but there's not a whole lot.
Yeah, a little bit,
Yeah, I know. I hadn't heard or heard the song either. Let me first say, this is the video I've been waiting for 4 episodes for us to see. I want every
It's so
80s
great.
video to be this wild and madcap. Like, this video was fantastic. And I think my favorite part of it is at the very beginning, and they run it twice. There's some dude in a suit, and he takes his hat off, and he's like waving it in the air and like skipping around in front of like there's like a truck following. It goes along. It looks like the most joyous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I want whatever that dude's having, because that dude looks like he's having a blast right now. But yeah, the video in particular, like I said, this is the one I've wanted us to watch for 4 months now. But the song is great too. I like kind of the polyrhythms with all of the percussion going on, and the industrial sounds. I like kind of phrase that came to my mind with the chorus vocals was ragtime, kind of the female like ragtime style vocals that go along there. Yeah, just a very, very bizarre song, and not really something I'm probably going to want to listen to all the time or anything. But I did really enjoy it.
I watched the video again, though.
Scott's got that shit on repeat.
Yeah.
I burned a hole in this thing since I heard it. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to compare it to, because while I was listening to it, I was like, this reminds me of something, this reminds me of something. And unfortunately, it does remind me of something that's also probably maybe as obscure as this, maybe not quite as much. But there was a song around 93, 94 by a Danish rapper / producer named Lucas. The song was called Lucas with the Lid Off.
Oh, hell yeah.
He sampled a Benny Goodman song in that track, and that's what it reminded me of. That's what my ears were telling me I was listening to, was this sort of, you know, taking old swing beats from the 30s, 20s, whatever, and kind of hardening them up a little bit with the drum beats and whatever. That's what this is. So I know I probably just, you know, tried to link an obscure song to another obscure song, but if you know Lucas with the Lid Off, which is kind of a jam, by the way,
and a hell of a video.
Speaking of videos, that is a great video. If you like that song and video or whatever, there's something here for you. It's got the same sort of vibe.
If you've been yearning for industrial 1920s mashup music, like that's what I was like, who was this made for? And not in a bad way, but just like, I don't think anyone really attempted anything like this.
Well, it was obviously made for me, but I didn't know it until just now.
Yeah. And I mean, I never would have made the Lucas connection. I kind of see where you're going with the Lucas with the Lid Off connection, but because what I was going to say was no one ever attempted an industrial mashup with like old school, 20s.
Well, especially at this time, the closest thing you had was like Jive Bunny and the Mixmasters, Yeah, that and this is so much better than that. That's just taking old swing songs and putting a beat underneath them. This is reworking it in a really interesting way, So it's much better than that,
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with that. Now, I really like the original Jive Bunny and the Master Mixer song. Their stuff got increasingly terrible as they cranked out more and more stuff, but that very first one, Swing the Mood, oh my god, I still love that.
It's fun. Jive Bunny and the Mixmasters is fun.
It is, but it's not this. No, it's
not
definitely
this.
not
this is so much more creative, I think, than that. But
yeah, the song's creative, the video is creative, because I like that, he is in the video, so there's contemporary shots in the video mixed with the 1920 stuff, but it's very well, it flows very, very well. Like you don't feel like you're getting yanked back and forth between like the 20s and the the 1980s or whatever. This also has a very happy, excitable woman in it too, like the other. This is like two out of the 4 videos that have like a very bubbly, happy woman in it. If I remember the video right.
We got the bubbly, happy woman in the 2 videos, and then aside from this video, it's the non-rockstar week. This guy William Tucker was the only guy we talked about this week that looked like he might want to actually be a rock star.
He does. that's true. Yeah, that's very true. Now let's go ahead and just point out, no one in any of these videos is even remotely as happy as that first dude that you were talking about in the suit that's
no, they
dancing
are
in front of the
Oh,
like.
no. I don't know if any of us have ever been that happy.
No. He and the lead singer from Mighty Lemon Drops are on such different parts of the spectrum in terms of their vibe for these
Yeah,
videos.
I don't see those two hanging out.
No, I don't think so. No.
We've gone from possibly the least happy singer I've ever seen to possibly the most happy human being we've ever witnessed do anything. Which that actually was a 1920s video, I think.
There is definitely like some actual footage in there, like
Yeah.
sort of interspersed with the
Yeah.
guy that did the song.
Yeah. Unlike the camper van Beethoven video where we think it was probably all staged, this one definitely was not.
No, yeah, this is actual like old footage. Yeah, the camper van Beethoven video, there might be some real footage in there, but a lot of that I think was filmed and then scratch the film up or whatever.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
you find yourself an old Super 8 camera, and it's it doesn't take much work to make it look crappy and old.
Right.
Like that's pretty much. And at that time, I mean, a home video camera is almost expensive as shooting 3 minutes of
Yeah, for sure.
Super 8.
Really hard to edit too.
Yeah, and the editing would be even more difficult. Whereas, Super 8. I mean, speaking of editing, one thing I forgot to mention that was in the Mighty Lemon Drops video, I think, is that big old reel-to-reel that's sitting in the middle of the stage.
Oh
when you're
yeah,
playing?
yeah, I think it is.
I totally forgot. Yeah, that was in
Yeah.
my notes, and I forgot to mention it. That brought me back to the old days of college radio, and
Cutting tape.
when Keith, Scott, and I all started, we actually edited on a reel-to-reel.
Yep.
I think of probably our entire college radio career, because I think they switched to digital right after you left, Keith, because you were the last of us there, but you were still reel-to-reel on your.
It was during my my time there that we switched to digital editing. It was during my
You switched
time
during it, okay.
that we got the first digital editing system. So I did get to play around with the first digital editing system that we had at KTXT. But yeah, for most of the time I was there, it was still cutting and splicing tape.
Yeah, I went to work at a commercial radio station right after KTXT, and I was still cutting tape and hanging it on the wall. So
Well, were they not digital yet?
They were not digital as of 95, 96, somewhere in there.
Interesting. Did you stay in radio long enough to switch over to digital production, or did you get out of radio before that?
Just
switch?
briefly. I got to play with it just a little bit, and then I moved on. But I wish I had, because years later when I was in Houston working at a nightclub, I went to the radio station there to cut some commercials for the club I was at, just voiceover. But watching that guy like record me and edit that together, I was like, damn, I wish I knew how to do that. Like he had his board. He would set the board to my voice where he liked it or whatever, and then I could come back 6 months later and he would push a button on a computer and the knobs would all go to where he wanted it for me, so he didn't have to do it again. It's like, God, that would have saved me so much time back in the day, But yeah, so I wish I had gotten more into digital editing, but I never really. I played with it, but I never really got into it.
I never got to professionally as a DJ or when I did limited production work at the AM station that I worked at for a while, and I used to cut stuff. But obviously now when I cut the film, obviously in like Final Cut Pro digitally and do a lot of editing that's more related to the videos that I'm doing. But I look back and I'm just like, God, how long? Because there's like today, I mean, I spent this morning editing some stuff together, and like looking back and just thinking, God, how long would that have taken me on a freaking reel-to-reel, doing some of the stuff.
Tape hanging on the walls everywhere.
Tape all over the place. And like you have to kind of try to label it so you don't lose track of what's what. It's so much easier these days. Like I can't even tell you how easy. I mean, I was editing footage this morning from guys that recorded it yesterday in New York, and were able to get it to me digitally, and I'm able to open it up digitally and instantly start editing but seeing that reel-to-reel in the video was the point of that. That brought me back to the KTXT days of razor blades and tape and just beating your head against the wall because you forgot to turn the record levels back up, or you forgot to didn't degauss the tape properly. All the little things. All right, another fun episode. Three fun songs for our regular rotation choices, and an especially fun mystery choice this week. They've all been pretty fun. I'm really loving this part of the episodes. But just going back and hearing, it was really fun to go back and listen to Camper Van Beethoven. Even though I did listen to them some about 4 years ago when I was doing the interviews for the film, but like that was a fun look back, and I really like shining a light on some of the bands that maybe didn't hit it quite as big, like the Squalls, but Man, yeah, I think the winner of this week is the Swinging Pistons. Not that there's an award, not that there's a trophy,
There's
not
no
that this isn't a competition, but if it was,
Like I said, every once in a while you just hear a song and it just makes you happy. And this song made me so happy.
It's a good one for sure.
thanks to 120minutes.org. They are the website that has, for the last several years and for many years, I think they've been collecting all these playlists and all this information about 120 Minutes on MTV. So I appreciate them doing all that work because it's helped us to be able to just go in and find songs and do these episodes. Next episode will be May of 1987. I don't exactly know. I think we may have some songs chose, but I don't even know what's coming up. So it'll be a surprise. But thanks for tuning in on this journey through 120 minutes. I appreciate it. For Keith Porterfield and Scott Mobley, my name is Michael Millard, and we will see you next time.